They had a marvellous time in the first half of this concert, listening to Leif Ove Ansnes. We're now going to hear a performance of a piece celebrated as one of the great pillars of the English repertoire, Elgar's elusive portrait of himself and his friends pictured within, as he put it, the Enigma Variations. There are 14 variations, each with the initials or the nickname of a friend as its title. Now, the identity of each of the characters is now known, but the meaning of the original Enigma theme remains unsolved. Despite endless speculation, Elgar never gave away what he called his dark saying, the personal secret at the heart of the piece. After early struggles to make a name for himself and to fulfill all the great gifts that he obviously had, it was only in 1899, when he was in his 40s, that he soared to prominence with the Enigma Variations. The theme, the haunting atmosphere, all that sense of mystery made an instant impact, and they've imprinted themselves on generations as representing the essence of a certain kind of English music. This is Elgar's world. Now, Leonard Slatkin, tonight's conductor, has been a regular guest with the Philharmonia Orchestra, and he's been for many years now a champion of English music. He's made acclaimed recordings of Walton and Vaughan Williams, and in 1992 he was awarded the Elgar Medal in recognition of his promotion of his music abroad. He's now a conductor, of course, celebrated around the world. The son also a musical father. His father, Felix Slatkin, a very well-known violinist and conductor, at one point led the 20th Century Fox Studio Orchestra and then went on to found the Hollywood Quartet after the war. Now, you may recall that at the Proms 4 years ago, Leonard Slatkin prefaced a performance of Mussorgsky's pictures at an exhibition with a short talk to the audience, and so again tonight, before he conducts the Philharmonia in the Enigma Variations, he's going to give us another introduction, offering his own interpretation of the music. And now here once again is the leader of the Philharmonia, Christopher Warren Green. And following him, the conductor, Leonard Slatkin, who will speak to us before he conducts Elgar's Enigma Variations.
Good evening. 4 years ago at these proms, the members of the Philharmonia and myself presented pictures at an exhibition, Mussorgsky's work, with each picture orchestrated by a different person. I can assure you this evening we're not going to do the same with these pictures. Some works have become so familiar to performers and to audiences that we take them for granted. We don't remember what inspired them, and we just listen to them without thinking how we can get involved in every way. And this piece, as we approach almost 100 years of its existence, is certainly a case in point. Most of the enigmas are solved. All but one of the characters are definite, and even the enigma, the major one itself, still has room for speculation. It's important to understand Elgar's state of mind when he was writing the work. He talked about the mistrust and betrayal of his friends, people who he did not feel were giving him the proper support he needed at a time, how to break out of being a regional composer and to be international. These are the friends that are pictured in the work. So the state of mind, I believe, is crucial in the way one presents the piece. It's true, the work can certainly be listened to without knowing one bit about any of the characters. But it's much more interesting when you do know it. Each of these miniature portraits, therefore, becomes important in terms of the relationship of the person to the music and hence to Elgar. Let's remind ourselves about the theme itself, a group of 4 notes, and in its opening 6 measures, these 4 notes are played in every possible combination of expression, dynamic, and rhythmic phase, and they sound like this. so. At first, it would appear to be quite simple, but in reality, those 4 notes and those phrases are always complicated. 4 notes, that's all. This is the enigma. What is it that is supposed to be the underlying theme, the theme that is played throughout, but never played? We don't hear it as a piece of music, a counterpoint, if you will. Well, it can't be another piece of music. He simply was improvising one night. His wife said, "Well, that's a nice tune." And Elgar said, "Yes, it is. Maybe I can do something with it." So it's not conscious. Many ideas have been put forth, from Auld Lang Syne, God Save the King, Mozart 38th Symphony, and even one of the members of the orchestra had a proposal of the slow movement of Haydn's Surprise Symphony, all of which can work in some musical way. But it doesn't make sense for it to be a conscious musical decision. So what can it be? What can this larger idea be? What's the only thing that links this theme with all of the other characters in the work? And it, of course, is the composer himself. Even though he will assign a variation to himself, there are enough clues in those variations to believe that this theme also represents the composer. Certainly, as a quasi-manic depressive, with that 4 notes played in all those different ways, it's viable. The first variation is Mrs. Elgar. Her theme is heard quite strongly in the oboes and bassoons, with that first 4 notes played very, very discreetly in the violins, and sounds like this. At the end of the variation, the roles reverse. The main tune, Elgar himself, to my mind, comes to the fore, dominating the theme of Mrs. Elgar in sexist convention of the time. The friends, as I said, I don't believe are all depicted in necessarily the nicest of terms. In fact, in some cases, the quirk that Elgar has chosen shows them in a somewhat unfavorable and unfriendly light. This would be okay if Elgar himself had not made known who these people were. But for instance, in the next variation, Hugh David Stewart Powell, a pianist, it's very clear that he's making fun of his friend, the amateur pianist, by indicating all of the wrong notes he plays as a warming-up exercise. Another amateur represented is a violist friend of his, Isabel Fritten. And this makes it, of course, the first conscious musical viola joke. And in this case, it's done in a very discreet and clever way. There are 2 manners of playing the first few notes of this piece, which involve a G natural and a C. Many performances are played like this. But Elgar is specific. He's talking about the cross-string and amateur abilities of his friend. Therefore, in order to indicate that in performance, it must really sound like this. Well, not quite like that. Other variations also indicate a bit of, well, I think, not sensitivity on Elgar's part. Dora Penny, one of the very closest of his friends, suffered from a speech impediment, a stammer. I think she believed that this was all in fun. But again, reflection tells us that maybe it's not so nice to try to put this in a piece of music as the one characteristic of the person. This is indicated by the woodwind, who have a series of 4 semiquavers, the first of which is played slightly elongated, so the 4 notes are not played evenly. Fortunately, Elgar does save himself at the end by indeed having those four notes played 3 times quite evenly, with these sort of mocking friends in the violins quite suddenly shocked by her ability to speak normally. When one hears a piece like this for the first time, without any knowledge of the story, as I said, you can certainly hear it as a piece of music without any problem. And when I first began to learn what these people were and who they represented, I was fascinated. But sometimes your own imagination takes over. And George Sinclair is represented in this not by the man, but rather by his bulldog, Dan. And the story that Elgar tells us is that the dog basically is falling down a hill towards the riverbank, and that's indicated in the first bar. Then we hear him climbing back up the hill for 2 bars and giving a little bit of a bark towards the end. However, I couldn't get out of my head what would happen after that. What would the rest of the story be? And from a very young age, I concocted that what was really happening was that Mr. Sinclair was taking a stick, throwing it into the river, trying to get the dog to go and fetch it. The dog would go so far, not get the stick, and then come running back joyously, yapping at the master. And therefore, at the end of the variation, to my mind, what would happen is Mr. Sinclair picked up the dog and threw him in the river, ending with a great splash. You'll never listen to it the same way again. The one person, the one enigma left within the pieces themselves that has yet to be entirely solved is the variation that contains the asterisks. It is speculated that it is a woman named Mary Ligon, although in recent years another name has surfaced. The questions are, why asterisks? And the bigger question is, what was the nature of the relationship of this person to Elgar himself, since we also know from sketches that Elgar was thinking about bringing this one, in addition to his wife and Nimrod, back in the finale. This one was not to come back in the finale, as Elgar originally suggested. It is a person who is going on some long journey at sea. It's represented by a clarinet solo that quotes Mendelssohn's Calm Sea and Prosperous Voyage, although the quotation itself could be any number of pieces, including the Schumann Piano Concerto. And we hear in the timpani the sound of the engine of the boat itself. But the question is, if he really deeply cared about this person, and there may have been something more than just a casual passing friendship, why is this such a dark-hued sound and variation? Finally, we come to the finale itself. Elgar, where we know, is representing his own persona. What you might not know is that there was, at its premiere, quite a different ending than the one we're used to. The one we hear virtually all the time now ends this way. Organ is going. It's very grandiose, some would say pompous. This is quite different than what Elgar had in mind originally. The first ending was about 2 minutes earlier than this material was to occur and was a bit more abrupt. We thought you'd like to hear it. It's not heard very often. We're not voting. We're going to play the other one. So, those are a few things along the way of investigation. It does help to know. It's important to understand why the piece was written, the circumstances under the composer's thoughts as he was going through the work. It increases for the musicians, myself, and hopefully you, our understanding of why a masterpiece becomes a masterpiece. Never take any piece of music for granted. Always try to become a participant in what is going on the stage. It's a wonderful feeling and a great experience. Ladies and gentlemen, the Enigma Variations.
Elgar's Enigma Variations, a piece somehow so much at home here, so intimate and so majestic at the same time. Played by the Philharmonia Orchestra, conducted by Leonard Slatkin, who now accepts the cheers of the Royal Albert Hall. So many people love that music. This audience has enjoyed it so much tonight. George Bernard Shaw exclaimed when he heard it, "I think we've got it at last." I say this as Leonard Slatkin introduces some of the soloists here. The principal clarinetist of the Philharmonia, Michael White. That was the viola player who took the solo, Roger Benedict, and also the cellist who took the solo, Andrew Schulman. And the whole orchestra now rises to accept the applause. Well, that brings us to the end of tonight's concert. But now the Philharmonia make way for the Hilliard Ensemble for a 10 o'clock performance of Arvo Pärt's St. John Passion in the late night prom. You can hear that, of course, live on Radio 3, as you can hear every prom in the season. BBC 2's next visit here marks a really historic moment, the 100th anniversary of the very first Henry Wood Promenade concert at the Queen's Hall. The new Queen's Hall Orchestra will play many of the pieces from that original concert in what is its first prom. And Richard Baker will introduce it at 7:30 on Thursday, the 10th of August.